And let me. Good morning, good afternoon. My name is Karen Barton, and I'm the training manager at National MI. I am so pleased to welcome our Chief Human Resources Officer of National MI, Mary Lee Sharp, to our webinar today. Mary Lee joined National MI over 3 years ago and was instrumental in shaping company culture and adding benefits and programs such as company-sponsored childcare or elder care and high-potential programs that foster gender diversity. That contributed to 2016 recognition of National MI by Fortune magazine as a great place to work for women. So with that, Mary Lee, the floor is yours.
And I am, in turn, delighted to introduce Kristin Messerli of Cultural Outreach Solutions, who is our featured speaker today. Kristin has worked with National Mortgage Insurance quite a lot and has shared her expertise over the past couple years in business topics ranging from improving service and communication with diverse home buyers, particularly millennial home buyers, as well as equalizing opportunities for home ownership and increasing empathy and diversity in the workplace. Kristin is also the editor of Mortgage Women magazine, and in keeping with the theme of more women in the mortgage industry, today Kristin will discuss women in the workplace and how to improve gender diversity in order to improve business practices that cultivate executive talent among women at all organizational levels. So thank you very much, Kristin, and I'll now turn this over to you.
Hey, thank you so much for a great introduction. There we go. I'm going to turn on my camera. And I'm really excited about this webinar in particular. It's different than anything that we've done before, and it's very relevant, I think, to a lot of what we're hearing in the news and media right now around sexual harassment, and even, lately we've been talking a lot more about getting more women in leadership roles and how companies can recruit for women. So in this webinar, I'm going to cover topics that I think will be relevant for everyone in the company, men and women, executives, managers, and colleagues that are associates. So I'm going to start by giving an overview of some of the kind of issues and challenges, and then get into some specific best practices in the workplace and how you can really assess your company's gender diversity as well. So as Mary Lee mentioned, I am the managing editor for Mortgage Women magazine, and would love any contributions. If anyone wants to write for the magazine or would like to talk about that, or be involved in any way, you can contact me. And of course, if you're not subscribed yet, we always are talking about this issue. So go to mortgagewomenmagazine.com for that free resource. I also just posted an article on LinkedIn called Starting the Conversation on Sexual Harassment. And this was published as just kind of a commentary for Mortgage Women magazine. And I would love your thoughts on this. It's just, again, starting the conversation. So if you check that out, I bring up a few concerns and questions and would love to hear from you guys in order to write a larger piece on this subject. So Cultural Outreach is a company that's completely devoted, this is my company, it's completely devoted to helping lenders better reach and serve young and diverse home buyers. We have a new program called betterloanofficer.com where we do customized coaching and provide social media content to make being in this digital age a lot easier. So you can find out more info at betterloanofficer.com. And the last thing I wanted to bring up before we dive in is this, of course, with the partnership with National MI, we're constantly putting out tons of free content and a lot related to the topics that we're talking about today. I just did a video interview with Claudia Merkel, who's the COO of National MI, and she provides some really awesome insights to women and managers on getting more women into leadership roles and how to kind of create that pathway. So check that out. You can follow National MI on Facebook to see all of this content, or on LinkedIn. And we're constantly publishing new infographics and all of that and interviews on a regular basis. So I'm going to start by giving a little bit, about the current landscape talk about the assessment and how you can assess your own company or branch or organization. And then some common challenges and tips and strategies for women's empowerment, both for men and women associates and managers. So first of all, women are earning more college degrees than men. This has been happening for a long time. So we've had a lot of progress in the last 30 years, really, around women's education. But we're still underrepresented at every level in corporate America, according to a study by McKinsey & Company, which, by the way, has a really great full white paper on this subject, so you can check that out. Women held 51% of professional positions in Fortune 500 companies, so that's great. But on average, women continue to be hired and promoted at lower rates than men. So 51% of professional positions, but that's not management level, and still a lot of the hiring and promotion is less consistent with women. And 63% of men believe that their company is doing enough to improve gender diversity. So I think this is a common concern, that we are doing enough. Like, people don't realize, I think, how much this is a lot of gender diversity is impacting women and their organizations. It's kind of like secretive, you know. I mean, the more that you talk about it, the more people tell you so many stories about how there might be unfair practices or just minor things where they feel like they have an unfair disadvantage. And so it's really important that you be very careful about assessing and following some of the strategies that I talk about today. So only 14% of women are in executive positions in banking. So this is particularly a problem in the mortgage industry and in banking, where we're not seeing very many women getting promoted or in positions of executive or C-suite positions. So why does any of that matter? Why does it matter if we have women in leadership positions and more women in the workplace? And this is because gender diversity actually increases financial returns. So yes, it's a great thing, and we always talk about diversity as being a good thing to do, but it actually makes a difference for your business. And gender diverse firms are 15% more likely to outperform their competitors. And I would think that this is even higher. I'm just looking at the companies that have women, or a lot of women in executive roles, or an equal amount of men and women. You see so much more productivity and innovation. So we'll talk more about that. Gender diversity creates a competitive edge because of this wider range of perspectives, and that's in any kind of diversity. It helps you create that competitive edge because it can lead to better business solutions, greater range of customer service, and higher returns. So a few of the traditionally feminine strengths might include higher education, strong communication skills, empathy towards diverse voices, and strong problem-solving skills. Now, this is traditionally feminine, but that doesn't mean it relates to every woman or that these are the only strengths. But I wanted to bring that up because that is something that is very common in more gender diverse firms. So they're seeing more of those strengths. And maybe one of the most important things about any kind of diversity is that it reflects the market. And women today are powerful consumers. They're, in fact, making up 1 in 5 home purchases. Single women accounted for 16% of recent home purchases, according to the National Association of Realtors. So the more women in executive positions, the more that they are going to understand the consumer and understand their employees in order to provide a better service experience and employment atmosphere. And I want to kind of close that topic on women's issues are everyone's issues. I think a lot of people look at any kind of gender diversity or women's topics, or even when we talk about ethnic diversity, and you kind of put it in the box of women or minorities, or these are your issues. But clearly this impacts everyone. And so that's really how I'm framing this whole discussion, is how can both men and women support each other in creating a more productive environment. So in this next section, I'm going to cover a few questions that you can use to assess your corporate performance around gender diversity. And I've created a handout on this as well. So if you, we'll make that available to you, and I'll email this out to everyone. But if you don't have it, you can contact someone at National MI, or I'll give you my contact information at the end. But it will provide you with this assessment as well. The first question is, are you leveraging employment data to identify and track progress? Everyone has their, you're tracking some kind of employment data, or required to, and your HR department will have this. But you want to know, of course, how many women are in the company as a whole, but then also how many women are in each level and department. So a lot of people have tons of women in their companies, but they're all on the operations side or kind of in one location. So think about that, and also think about women of color. Women of color are the most underrepresented demographic. So take a look at that. Also, what's your turnover rate for women in your organization, and what is their current satisfaction level? So you might be hiring women, but then if they feel uncomfortable or don't feel like they really belong, it feels like kind of a man's world, you might see women assimilate into that and kind of take on a lot of traditionally male roles or attitudes and perspectives. Or you might see them say, you know, this isn't for me, I'm out. And they might actually physically leave the organization, or they might just withdraw a lot. So being able to identify that and make sure you have a culture and environment that's very empowering of women is super important in order to see the most success in your organization. One thing you might consider doing is doing a public disclosure of this. You don't have to release the numbers, but I think it's a really, it's a cool commitment to make, to say, hey, we have really low diversity in our firm, or we don't have many women in our company, and so we want your help. We're putting out this public announcement that we're working on this, and would love your help in making this happen, or something to that degree, or we want you to hold us accountable to the public. Or you may just want to create a campaign around this topic and say, hey, we are recruiting women. We're looking to assess our company's diversity standards and make this a more inclusive environment. And that's something that everyone is supportive of. I mean, everyone wants to have an inclusive environment. And if you position it the right way as a campaign that is kind of exciting in this area, you can really get a lot of momentum and benefit in many other ways outside of just getting more diversity. I did a white paper in partnership with Altera Home Loans, where we talked about the problem with, or some of the problems and challenges that they had in recruiting women and getting women into leadership roles, and published this, and it got huge traction. I mean, lots of interest in that area and a lot of exposure. So that's one thing you could consider doing as well. Second question in this assessment is, when and how does the company's leadership discuss sexual harassment, boundaries, and company standards? It should not be only at a sexual harassment training, or the sexual harassment training should not be some like kind of silly game they do on the computer. I've seen companies do a lot of these that are just required trainings, and a lot of it is we need to have authentic discussions on this topic and make it known that these are the boundaries. There's been a bit of a culture shift in terms of what we really define as sexual harassment today. And so you need to articulate that to your company and to your employees who maybe were fine telling dirty jokes or making fun of, you know, women in certain ways and derogatory terms. That might have been fine a few years ago, but today it's not okay. And so you need to explain this shift and what those boundaries are, so that no one gets in trouble and your company, you know, you don't hurt yourself, and of course to make a safer place for women. There's a leader, Rick Rock, just posted on this on Facebook, talking about how many years ago we might have created a place where women could go to work, or but we didn't make it safe for them. And so now we're kind of moving that very far that direction, And while we might end up having the pendulum swing a little bit far, it's that much more important that we are very clear about those boundaries. So use the media coverage around the Me Too campaign and all of that as a launching point to have these discussions and speak very authentically. You cannot have this mentality that you're just going to ignore it and wait for something to come up. Please make sure you're proactive on this subject. So one way you can also kind of be more proactive around the subject of sexual harassment in particular is by using performance reviews as an opportunity for open communication and mutual feedback. And so whenever you have these performance reviews, make sure, say, hey, I also want to make sure that you can create an open space for confidential disclosures. Say, hey, I want to make sure that you can tell me anything. If there's anything that makes you feel uncomfortable, I want to make sure that we're talking about it and addressing it, and that this is a safe place where you feel empowered. And so, make that a topic of conversation in these reviews. And of course, in those reviews, also talk about career advancement. That is a huge factor for women feeling like they have the opportunity to move up in an organization. Obviously, talking about it is one way of making that happen. But I've talked to a lot of women who just say that they didn't feel like there was room for growth for them. And so they moved to another company where they knew that they could rise into a leadership position. But so if you're having those conversations, you can come up with ways that you can either create positions or provide more management experience. Women want to build their careers just like anyone else, just like men, and have those career advancement opportunities. So having the conversation makes women in particular feel more like they are given the right support, I think. Also have conversations around compensation and, again, management responsibilities. Fourth question is your brand and messaging effective in reaching women? So many times I look at companies' materials, marketing and recruitment materials, and I just think, wow, that is not for me. It is not geared toward women. It feels very masculine. Even looking at things like the colors of your logo, or, I know that's a dramatic shift, but really colors and design make a big difference. And some small changes you can make is just making sure you have women in your recruitment materials and on your website and looking like they are in executive positions. So they see that, they can imagine themselves being in that position. What does your brand say to women? You should know that and be asking women for feedback on that. Do your recruitment materials incorporate some of the values as well? Like women specifically are looking for are going to be more likely to want to see workplace flexibility and upward mobility in the organization, having a feedback. Those are a few of the things that are very important to women specifically. And so make sure you have that incorporated into your materials. And women also tend to be more mission driven. So make sure it's not all about profit or money, although that's obviously very important too. But it's also about the impact and the culture of your organization. And then the fifth question is, how do you support working parents? This is a huge challenge I found for organizations trying to promote more women into leadership, is that a lot of women just don't feel like they could even handle the leadership position because they have disproportionate childcare responsibilities in their home. So almost 50% of women are the primary household breadwinners, yet women still account for 75% of primary caregivers. So we've come a long way in progress in becoming half of the primary breadwinners, but we're still way by far taking all of the household and childcare responsibilities. So what can you do to offer flexibility or help women feel more supported? One organization lets women and men bring their children to work sometimes, or like if they need to, there's space for them. They have a little playroom. that really can help a lot. And of course, the flexibility is the most important thing, where they don't feel like they are going to be punished in any way by taking that time to take their kids to school or whatever the case may be. And then sixth question is, how do you promote clear pathways for promotion and career advancement? So we talked about, of course, the performance reviews as being one of those opportunities, but how do you have these conversations on a regular basis? Do you encourage and structure mentorship opportunities? One of the big challenges for women is that a lot of times it's men in executive positions, and they will naturally gravitate toward mentoring other men. And women, maybe because for a variety of reasons, one may be, in fact, childcare responsibilities that we talked about before, where they're not hanging around the office after hours or kind of making those networking connections. But so you have to be a little bit more intentional in order to make sure that women are getting the same kind of mentorship opportunities as men in your workplace. So also ways you can do that is to encourage attendance at leadership workshops and networking events. Sometimes it just helps to be encouraged to actually go, that this is an important thing. So in this last section, I'm going to talk about some of the challenges and pitfalls that exist in talking about these issues and working through gender diversity in the workplace, and then some specific tips for associates and managers to better support women from the male perspective and female perspective. Common challenges and pitfalls. The first is shying away from male-female mentorship relationships. It's so easy for us to, I think even especially in today's environment where we're getting, I think, a lot of media coverage around sexual harassment and very real issues. I don't want that to cause anyone to pull back from having those male-female interactions or mentorship kind of opportunities. I think three mentors I have, one being my core mentor advisor is male, and Dave Savage, and he has always been completely supportive, like not worried about, oh, if we get a drink together, what will it look like? Because nothing's wrong. He's mentoring me and everything is completely appropriate. And you can feel if it's when I have had drinks with other men who I thought were mentors, you can feel that energy that it's not actually set up that way. And so you want to make sure that you are leaning into this topic and saying, hey, we are going to make sure that this is equal and empowering for women, and that no one is getting that kind of creep vibe, I think. Secondly, that brings me to uncertainty about professional boundaries. So is it okay to go to dinner together? I say absolutely. That is completely appropriate. That's my perspective. I know someone feels otherwise. I was talking to a male branch manager who said that feels uncomfortable, like women are thinking he's, wanting something, and so he brings his wife. So that's an option as well. Bring another associate. That I've seen that happen as well. But make sure you're still, again, like being leaning into those relationships and not stepping back. But then the other side of this is to be very clear about professional boundaries in the workplace, and not overstep those. So just especially in the holiday season, and as there's lots of parties, I know that this is going to be a common issue that comes up. And again, as we talked about before, having the conversation is the most important thing to preventing that. Also, one of the things about professional boundaries, it's really important that we are clear about what's okay in terms of joking and like actual conversation, because I think a lot of people think it's okay to say something derogatory to a woman. And I can't tell you how many times I have like come off the stage from speaking and someone makes a comment about my legs. And I'm just like, man, that's so inappropriate. And of course, I think the best response to anything like that, if you're a woman on the call, is to just you know, laugh it off and say like, hey, that's really inappropriate. Hope you got something else from the presentation or something like that. But I think it's important that we call those things out, and that everyone understands in the workplace what's appropriate and what's not in terms of these kinds of jokes. Don't make comments about physical appearances and that kind of thing. So lack of invitations given to women for after work drinks and dinners. I just talked about that. And then the disproportionate burden of household and childcare responsibilities is a really huge pitfall that we've already talked about. So a few tips for the male associates and managers in the room or virtually. And the first is to be intentional about equal invitations. So, you know, and one thing as a manager you can do is actually say, hey, everyone is going on a mentor or a lunch or coffee with another associate, and you switch off every week, and just make sure that everyone is being included in that. Because I think the more that you get to know each other, the more likely you will have those repeat lunches and coffees. It's just that naturally at the beginning, many times men will go to lunch with or go to dinner with another man, and again, kind of shy away from that. So be intentional and be supportive of that. Also act as a sponsor or opening the door to invitations. So maybe women in the room didn't get the same invitations that you got for an after work networking event or one of the conference parties, and just be intentional about like, hey, I know this would be really good for her career to be out and around these people, so I'm going to invite her. I've had so many people, Alex, the CEO of Sales Boomerang, did this, and lots of mentors have done this for me, where that was so meaningful, where I thought, man, he, in a very appropriate way of being extremely supportive of me and my career by just saying, hey, come to this party, or hey, you know, opening that door and making introductions. And also just encouraging your associates to go to these events. Because of course, this is where the business really happens, and it's at networking events, and for a lot of people, people do business with individuals, and so the more that you're seen out in the community as well, that's really important. But so encourage women in your firm to actually attend these and step out in that way. And I talked about avoiding this, but avoiding commenting on physical appearances. You can say you look nice or all of that, but maybe try not to say things like, oh, I really like when you wear skirts. Like, I've had that happen, and I know it was not intentionally meant to be weird, but it's just, you know, be careful about this, especially right now where everyone's a little bit more sensitive about this topic, and it just can make you as a woman, me as a woman, feel a little bit more uncomfortable, I think. And then actively engage in their goals and career objectives. Talk about ways that you, as an associate or manager, can be supportive of those goals and objectives. And then, of course, be an active listener. That is very important for women, that we feel like we've been listened to. And the more that you actually listen, the more likely that you will be an advocate for change as well. Because if I'm saying, hey, it's freezing in this office, like I wear a skirt and a blazer every day, and I have to wear this giant heavy coat in order to survive in this office, and you realize like, oh, that's because men are controlling the thermostat, because everyone in the executive position is a male, or whatever the case may be an advocate for that and say, hey, women in the room are freezing, or hey, the women were not invited to this networking event, let's invite them. You know, just be intentional about looking for those ways that you can advocate for change. Now, a few tips for female professionals. One, don't shy away from male-female relationships either. So don't feel like this is in any way, don't assume the worst and just you always have your guard up. But one thing that I did early on was I had a guy who was, I think, being a mentor in some ways, but then I realized that he was interested in something more. And I just completely cut him out. A couple different people who were really well known in the industry, and I regretted that so much. Later, I had another mentor tell me, who was very appropriate, and he was saying, why'd you do that? You just gotta put the boundary down, and then you still need these people in the industry. You still need to work with the people. So don't push everyone away just because there might have been something inappropriate said. You can set down those boundaries. And one thing I would love for any women on the call to hear and really internalize is this ability to say when something is inappropriate. If someone is making you uncomfortable, you can try using humor a little bit and say, like, hey, that's I don't know, you can laugh it off, but make a point. But also feel comfortable being direct and saying, hey, it really makes me uncomfortable when you comment on my clothing all the time, or it really makes me uncomfortable when X. And the more that you can be assertive in that way, the more respected you're going to be anyway. And that's your way to, I think, greater success. So as I said, call them out for that. And if anything is assaulting, like if you are in any experience that related to sexual assault, of course, always report that. Especially in today's environment, you will not be punished, in your career for reporting something like that. So I really want to encourage that, because it's happening to then other women as well. And it also gives you the voice to be able to, whenever you call someone out. So the third tip is to compartmentalize home and work projects and delegate as much as possible. This is something that Claudia Merkel, COO of National MI, had said on on the interview that I did with her. She said that a lot of women just feel very overwhelmed, like they can't take a breath if they take on another an executive position role, because they're thinking about, how to take care of everything at home and at work. But the best thing to do is just to compartmentalize everything and say, okay, on Tuesday, I'm going to do the laundry from 5 to 7 p.m. And you kind of put it in your calendar and set that aside. Other things you can do are hire people don't be afraid to hire people to help you with things at home. You can try something called TaskRabbit. I love TaskRabbit because you can hire someone very easily for cleaning or organizing. Makes me want to do it right now. It's just such a great service. And then negotiate what you want. Work-life flexibility, if that is what you want and you don't care as much about being in a C-suite position, or you want both of those, be communicating that to your managers, and also be putting that on your on your mirror or wherever you are looking on a regular basis. You need to remember and stay focused on the things that you really care about, and then and make sure you're making progress in communicating that to your managers. Make sure you're negotiating compensation. You negotiate, or you get what you negotiate for. So check out Negotiating Your Life, which is a TED Talk by Meg Myers-Morgan. She's written a few articles for Mortgage Women magazine and is an author, incredible author. Has a couple of books out now. I think her Negotiating Your Life book might be out by now. And but the TED Talk is really, really good. So check that out for more tips on negotiating what you want. Then the last thing is to demonstrate your value to managers. So as you think about those goals, like this is what I want to achieve in my career, or this is what I want from this position, you need to make sure that you are actually tracking and sharing that progress with your managers. Don't assume that people are just going to see that and notice it. You need to be confident and say, hey, just wanted to let you know I did this, this, and this. And there's an article that I did with an interview with Casey Cunningham where she describes specifically how to do that. And that's in Mortgage Women magazine as well, if you want more information on this. But one of my favorite mottos is fake it till you make it. I think that sometimes we don't feel like we have it all together yet, and so we don't want to take that next step. And but you just have to pretend like you do, pretend like you are ready for it, and then you'll become ready. And that has been definitely my key to moving forward. So in closing, I want to leave you with a few quotes from some of my favorite women leaders in the industry. One was Claudia Merkel with the interview that I've spoken about. She said, sometimes you just have to organize and compartmentalize. Put in the calendar when you're going to do it and let go. So that's what I was talking about earlier. Really great thing for women to hear and men. And then this is advice from Casey Cunningham. My 3 pieces of advice are: 1, act like you already have the job. 2, make it about helping others. And 3, make sure someone knows the impact you are having, specifically your direct manager. And this was an area that I think is really important for women specifically to hear, that you have to track and show that progress. And then another interview I've done with Christine Beckwith, she says, plans and goals are not reached in leaps, but many steps strung together. So baby steps, keep your goals in front of you, and then make those small steps toward what you want. So, in summary, women's issues are everyone's issues. As you can see, this is not just a women's focused problem. It affects the entire organization. And I'm hopeful that everyone is on board with really empowering and encouraging, supporting the women in your organization. Secondly, review your assessment. So those questions that I outlined in this presentation or in the handout that you might have available to you, as I said, I have that assessment in the handout format, so I'll email that to you. And then third, provide tips for male and female employees and managers to support women. So make sure you're having these conversations about boundaries, about sexual harassment, and about how you can encourage and empower women in your organization. Make it a positive thing and something that you're excited about and moving forward in a progressive way in your company. So again, I want to remind you to sign up at mortgagewomenmagazine.com. Check out the article I posted on LinkedIn, respond to me, tell me your thoughts on that, starting the conversation on sexual harassment. And then I had mentioned that we have a new program, betterloanofficer.com. You can get a free month of this where we provide you with social media content and a bunch of content related to better reaching young and diverse home buyers. So like training, coaching stuff in addition to the social media content. And you can contact me at, or my company, info@culturaloutreach.net. My personal email is Kristin@culturaloutreach.net. Either one will get there. And if you want to try out betterloanofficer.com, you can use the code FIRSTFREE for your first month free. So I really appreciate you guys staying on the line and listening to this topic. I would love to hear from you, some of the examples that you've had and questions that may have come up. And then I am always happy to hear those and respond to those. So I know we're a little early, and but I will pass this over to Karen and see if we have any questions.
Well, thanks a lot, Kristin, and we don't have any questions at this time, but we always enjoy hosting you here at National MI and feel that we provide good quality education to our lenders, so we sure appreciate the partnership. And everyone, thanks for joining us today, and make it a great day. Thanks, Kristin.
Thank you.